Yo my dudes, welcome back to Pup Smuggler Gaming. My name is Ash, and today I want to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's again, because why the fuck not? Now today I actually want to talk about the books instead of the games. More specifically, I want to talk about the second series of books, Fazbear Frights. Unlike the first series of books where it was 4 novels covering the same story, Fazbear Frights is a bunch of short, seemingly disconnected stories, kind of like Goosebumps. Now, these Goosebump-esque stories pull information from all sides of the Five Nights at Freddy's universe, as well as adding some new information, and sets it into a more human setting, which is very interesting because it gives us a bit more insight into how people would actually respond to the Five Nights at Freddy's creatures. As of recording this video, there are 5 Fazbear Frights books covering a total of 15 short stories, and each of them include a tiny piece of an ongoing story regarding the investigation of the Stitch Wraith. Now, the Stitch Wraith is an animatronic endoskeleton that was brought to life through the power of agony by Dr. Phineas Taggart. Now, I want to take a moment to actually go more in depth with the Stitch Wraith thing before going into the list, so if you want to just skip all that and you already know what's going on, go ahead and just skip to the list. I will warn you, I do give a fairly brief summary of each story, so I don't blame you if you just want to fast forward ahead to each one, but I would also appreciate it if you just sat there and listened to what I have to say, but I get it. It's going to be a long video, so go ahead. I'll wait. You done? Everyone gone that wants to skip? Cool. Now, the Stitch Wraith is confirmed to have at least 2 spirits in it. Jake, sweet and innocent, and in full control of the animatronic and sight and movement and everything. And then there's Andrew, who's angry and vengeful and completely blind to the outside world other than what Jake is telling him. However, there seems to be a 3rd spirit with nothing but ill will, because every single time Jake tries to touch someone, he accidentally electrocutes them and kills them, causing black oily liquid to spill from their eyes. The first victim of this absolutely horrific death was actually Dr. Phineas Taggart, the creator. The implication of there being a 3rd inhabitant in the endoskeleton is actually from the epilogue of Step Closer, where there's an exchange between Jake and Andrew. Quote, "You want to kill people? No. Then why? I just want to scare people, okay? Give them a zap. The zap is killing them. Well, that wasn't what I wanted. Okay. So if what you're doing isn't doing what you want, maybe it's doing something someone else wants." Unquote. Furthering the lore of the Stitch Wraith is the discovery that Andrew has actually attached himself to multiple objects, including the man who hurt him. Now, as he infects these objects, he infects them with his anger, leaving them completely capable of wreaking havoc. However, Andrew's an angsty little shit, and when Jake wants to go and clean up the mess Andrew left behind, Andrew refuses to help him. Thankfully for Jake, however, he does realize that he can actually feel what Andrew's feeling, and is using that to go and collect all of the objects that were infected by Andrew. Alright, after that unnecessarily long intro, it's time to jump into my ranking of the Fazbear Frights stories from worst to best. Now, I want to emphasize that it's my ranking, so my feelings most likely will not reflect your own. I would also like to take a minute to say there will likely be an updated version after all the Fazbear Frights books are released, because so far we've got at least 3 more coming: Blackbird, The Cliffs, and Gumdrop Angel. Also, I don't think it needs to be said, there will be spoilers, so if you don't want spoilers, what are you doing here? Seriously, come on. Number 15, To Be Beautiful. Sarah is a young girl with self-esteem issues and is completely obsessed with, you'll never believe it, being beautiful. Anyway, she stumbles upon a broken animatronic in the trunk of a car in a scrapyard and brings home this ugly-ass, long-necked animatronic that for some reason heavily resembles Baby. After fixing up Giraffe Baby, who we learn is named Eleanor, Eleanor is so grateful she grants Sarah one wish. Again, super surprising, Sarah wishes to become beautiful. Eleanor gives Sarah a necklace that she instructs Sarah to never remove, and each night tells Sarah to go to sleep. Every morning, Sarah, body part by body part, becomes more beautiful. Sarah gradually joins the group of popular girls and even gets asked out by her crush. After the full transformation, Sarah trips at school, drops the necklace, and is revealed to be made of junk and scraps. She runs home and discovers garbage bags filled with, presumably, her body parts, and as her new junk body falls apart, she sees Eleanor walk away looking like her. Alright, honest opinion, I hated it. It was the only one that when I was reading it, I was bored the whole time, and Sarah was so unlikable. I mean, The ending was a little unexpected, and it does give us some more insight into the capabilities of the illusion disc from Sister Location and the first book series, but it just, I don't know, it was boring to me. And honestly, if I wanted to read about an angsty girl who hates herself, I would just pull out my diary from 2012 and read that instead. Number 14, Counting the Ways. Millie Fitzsimmons, a goth girl who just recently moved in with her grandfather, who is a collector, wakes up in the chest cavity of Funtime Freddy. With his two eyes peering down at her, he reveals he plans to kill her because she's always talking about death, just as any stereotypical goth girl should. There are several flashbacks that reveal how she ended up there. After getting close to a guy named Dylan, whom she develops a crush on, she learns that he is only interested in her as a friend, and their friendship completely ends. At her grandfather's Christmas party, Millie wants to hide from her family and ends up climbing into Funtime Freddy's chest cavity. Between the flashbacks, Freddy provides several options for her demise, including starvation, freezing, impalement, electrocution, boiling, and decapitation. She chooses decapitation, hoping she would be able to duck and avoid the blade. After Funtime Freddy gives an execution speech, Millie vows that if she survives, she'll change her ways. The blade slices through the cavity, and the story cuts to her grandfather arranging presents for Millie when she comes back. I know, how dare I put 2 stories from the first book this low on the list, but honestly, I think it belongs here. It didn't do a whole lot for the lore, other than confirm that the Funtime animatronics do have a drive to kill, and, they're built to capture and kill, and Millie was just unlikable, and as much as I love a redemption arc that gets cut off and is never able to meet its conclusion, I really didn't care. Number 13, Room for One More. Stanley, a man in a dead-end security job in an underground facility where he's tasked with making sure nothing gets out, is sad and hates his job. Sounds a little familiar. His girlfriend left him because he wasn't ready to take the next step in their relationship, and his father recently passed away from cancer. His job is boring and the ventilation sucks, so he usually ends up falling asleep. One night, the motion detector in one of the vents goes off, and when he looks back at his desk, there's a mini-arena, which he plays with for a bit before falling back asleep. When he wakes up, it's gone, and as he leaves, he has a strange pain in his throat and left arm. The pain gradually gets worse, and his family convinces him to go to the hospital if he doesn't get better. Each night on the job, he has a series of strange nightmares, one with Funtime Foxy as a taxi driver, one with Funtime Freddy staring at him after the facility power cuts, and one where Ballora is a nurse in a dentist office. After the last nightmare, he wakes up to find a mini-Rena crawling into his mouth. As he tries to run to the hospital, he collapses, and another mini-Rena asks if there's room for one more, causing Stanley to scream and allows the mini-Rena to crawl into his open mouth. The story was okay. I mean, it did drive home the whole animatronics climbing inside a human body and stuff like that, but other than that, it was pretty straightforward, and I don't know, I did enjoy it. Plus, it also gave us Funtime Foxy Taxi Driver and Nurse Ballora, so it's worth a read. Number 12, 1:35 a.m. Delilah, a young woman with a tragic past including a recent divorce that shattered her dreams of having a family, is stuck in a bit of a funk. She has next to no motivation and has developed a hatred of alarm clocks, which, honestly, I relate to. I mean, not the tragic backstory and divorce, but the other stuff. She finds a doll named Ella at a garage sale that resembles the child she never had, including the name being close to the one she had chosen for her non-existent child, Emma. Additionally, Ella doubles as an alarm clock. Hooray! She buys the doll, sets the alarm for 1:35 p.m., and proceeds to oversleep. She's furious, and like any reasonable, responsible mother would do, she throws it in the garbage. She's awoken time and time again at 1:35 a.m., and after the very first night of this, she realizes she had likely set the time to a.m. instead of p.m. She tries to find the doll and can't. She then tries to run from the constant disruptions and torment until she finally ends up dying after getting stuck in the vent of a construction site. So, I did like the story. It felt like it dragged on a little bit longer than it should have, and while I did feel bad for Delilah, she threw away Ella in a heartbeat without checking to see if she had set the time wrong. Like, who the fuck does that? Who trashes their alarm clock without checking to make sure they weren't just being stupid and fucked it up? Plus, on top of that, she got this thing because it resembled a child that she wanted, and she threw it away. Honestly, probably a good thing Howard divorced her, because I wouldn't trust this woman with a frickin' child. Like, at all. Also, slightly unrelated, I do want to note the parallel between this Ella doll and the Ella doll that appears in the first book series. I'm sure a lot of people have already established that, but I just wanted to throw that one out there. So, number 11, Dance With Me. Casey, a young adult kicked out at the age of 16 by her neglectful mother, joins Jack and AJ as a group of thieves. After stealing a purse from a woman with 2 kids outside of Circus Baby's Pizza World, she discovers a pair of cardboard glasses with a note that reads, "Put on the glasses and Ballora will dance for you." She puts them on, and wouldn't you know it, she sees Ballora. She goes to show AJ and Jack, but they don't see anything. Still feeling like Ballora was following her, she runs off to start over. She then, still not fully learning her lesson, attempts to steal a dress for an interview and gets caught, but luckily for her, an old lady in the store buys it for her. Gotta love those wonderful reverse Karens. After seeing Ballora extremely close to her, pressed against her window and having several nightmares about her, Casey decides to do the right thing. She returns the belongings to the woman she robbed outside of Circus Baby's Pizza World, as well as the glasses to the woman's daughter. I particularly found this one interesting because it actually has a good ending, which is kind of rare for these stories. However, it doesn't really do much for the lore, other than maybe do more for the illusion disc, but it's kind of hard to tell, because the only time you see the things that she was experiencing was with the illusion disc, but it wasn't affecting everyone around her, so that was a little strange in my opinion. Plus, I'm also kind of a sucker for bad endings, which is why I placed this one lower on the list, but overall, I did enjoy this one. Number 10, Out of Stock. Oscar helps his widowed mother with everything around the house, as well as assisting her at the nursing home she works at. He considers himself unlucky, but is hopeful he can get his hands on a plush trap chaser, a 3-foot animatronic toy that moves in the dark and freezes in the light. In other words, weird fucking nightmare fuel, like, who the fuck would want this thing? Anyway. After school and helping his mother at the nursing home, Oscar meets with his friends Isaac and Raj, but is too late to get one. However, Oscar overhears an employee talking about one that was returned for being oddly realistic, and chose to grab it and run. When Oscar and his friends finally check it out, its eyes are squishy and its teeth look unsettlingly like human teeth. Making matters worse, the damn thing doesn't even work. They try to return it, but the store they stole it from was gone. Not in a supernatural way, but more of an out of business and replaced by a Halloween store way. A few days later, Isaac and Raj come over. The boys notice a charging port on the plush trap, and Oscar tries to charge it, causing a power surge, soon followed by Oscar getting in an argument with his mom over the landline just as the power completely goes out. With no contact to the outside world, a couple of the cheapest flashlights money can buy, and an out-of-control 3-foot monster rabbit capable of chewing through doors, the boys are seemingly fucked. That is until Oscar tricks the plush trap to stand in front of an oncoming train, and the thing gets flattened into what has to be the most disgusting pancake ever. I actually really enjoyed this one. Like, I'm not a huge plush trap fan, but it was really suspenseful and it was really interesting. However, my biggest problem with this story was the flaw in that, how the fuck did this thing even get to the store? How did this thing get sold? How did it make it past the production line? Like, seriously, how the Number 9, Fetch. Greg and his friends Haiti and Cyril sneak into an abandoned Freddy's after Greg feels like he needs to go there. Greg activates a little animatronic dog named Fetch before the boys hear a door slam and run away. Greg starts getting texts from Fetch, soon realizing the animatronic is tracking everything he does. Greg gets assigned to do a project with his crush, Kim, about REGs, which we'll come back to later. After getting bit by his neighbor's devil dog, he later finds the dog dead in his yard and another text from Fetch. He attempts to go back to find the animatronic dog, but can't find it. Later on, he wishes he had more money for the project he's working on, and like a total dumbass, texts his wealthy uncle Darren that he needs the help of Darren's magic finger of luck, to which Fetch retrieves, leaving the finger on Greg's doorstep and his uncle in pretty bad shape from a wild animal attack. Greg sees the animatronic dog outside and destroys it and buries it. Later that day, Greg's friends tell him Kim is looking for him, and after he calls, he gets a text from Fetch saying, "Will retrieve," causing Greg to rush over to Kim's house and subsequently getting the police called on him by her father after Greg tries to explain the insane reasoning for why she's in danger. After getting home, he gets a shower and finds Kim's body outside the bathroom door covered by a blanket. So I want to address the whole REGs thing that occurs throughout this entire story and the fact that Fetch is presumably an REG or random event generator. Now, I'm not the best at describing how REGs work, but essentially it just produces random numbers, usually zeros and ones, and in the story they talked a lot about trying to manipulate REGs with thoughts and feelings, which is pretty interesting, and even though it's widely regarded in real life to be a bunch of bullshit, it's still pretty fascinating. And it also kind of brings up the question of what kind of technology were some of these animatronics made with? Like, they seem way too advanced for the time that they were supposedly made, so I don't know. Number 8, Into the Pit. Oswald is a young child that comes from a family that financially is barely making it by. His best friend has recently moved away, so his summer vacation is spent at the library and Jeff's Pizza. The restaurant has a stage Oswald has never seen used, a roped-off ball pit, and a strange amount of open space. After an argument with his dad, Oswald decides to mess with him by hiding in the ball pit at Jeff's. Then he, ends up in a Freddy Fazbear pizzeria in 1985. Yeah. Anyway, he makes friends with Chip and Mike and discovers going back into the ball pit brings him back to his time. He starts going into the ball pit every day to play with Chip and Mike and occasionally notices a guy in a yellow rabbit suit who's just kind of standing there and nobody seems to notice him. One day he climbs out of the ball pit to see everyone screaming and crying as they run for the exit. Meanwhile, the yellow rabbit beckons Oswald to follow him to one of the back rooms, and wouldn't you know it, there are 6 dead kids with party hats on. He gets back to his time, and before his dad can yell at him, his dad gets pulled into the pit and is replaced by the yellow rabbit. However, nobody but him and his cat seem to notice that his dad just got replaced by a giant yellow rabbit. Anyway, he manages to get back to Jeff's, find his dad unconscious, and causes the yellow rabbit to accidentally hang itself on a rope above the ball pit. This was the only story from the first book I actually really liked. It was super freaking weird, and the time-traveling ball pit came out of absolutely nowhere. Like, nowhere. And also, it gave us a new event where there were 6 kids killed in 1985, which has never appeared in the games before. And they were all displayed openly, so unlike the games where it was 1987 and the kids went missing and were never found, this one was, a little bit more obvious, which was a little interesting. I would also like to note that Oswald's interest in video games, old Japanese movies, animatronic animals, and manga actually draw pretty heavy parallels between him and the in-game indie developer mentioned in Help Wanted. Number 7, Lonely Freddy. Alec is a troubled teen that is completely convinced his younger sister, Hazel, is a manipulative, spoiled brat and is frustrated that every move he's made since Hazel was born is met with scrutiny and scorn. In preparation for Hazel's upcoming birthday, Hazel starts working with Alec to drive his parents crazy. He sees this as a chance to reveal her as a fraud, and for the next few days, he is on his best behavior as Hazel uncharacteristically starts acting out. At the party, Alec removes the ticket from the wind tunnel for the Yarg Foxy, a plush toy that both Alec, being a huge Yarg Foxy fan, and Hazel want. After Hazel finishes her time in the wind tunnel, she finds a Yarg Foxy ticket in her hair. She attempts to give it to Alec as a peace offering, as she just really wants to get along with her brother, but he lashes out in frustration as she's ruined his plan and accidentally rips the arm off Foxy before running off to a back room. In the back room, he runs into a Lonely Freddy, a small animatronic designed to befriend lonely kids at parties. The Freddy starts asking him questions that quickly turn strange, and Alec becomes unable to move. The Freddy body swaps with Alec, leaving him trapped in the body of the animatronic, and after attempting to get back to his family, Kid throws up on him and he gets tossed in a dumpster with a bunch of other Lonely Freddys screaming for help. Okay, I actually really like this one. While I'm not a huge fan of the whole angsty teen angle that a lot of these stories take, I am a huge fan of the whole character arc that can never reach its end, like I said earlier on in this video. The thing with this one is that made it better than Counting the Ways is just the desperation of Hazel trying to get Alec's approval and Alec just not being able to get over his me against the world mindset. It's so sad and heartbreaking to just watch all of it play out. Also, the whole Lonely Freddy being able to body swap does kind of give an option for how Glitchtrap and Help Wanted was able to escape, which is pretty interesting, and even though a lot of us kind of figured that was kind of how it worked, it's pretty interesting to hear stuff like that happening to somebody in these stories. So, yeah. Number 6, The Man in Room 1280. Arthur Blythe, an enthusiastic priest who tries to see the best in everyone and everything, is called to Heracles Hospital to visit the patient in room 1280. The man's entire body is burnt, his organs exposed, and his face and eyes are gone. He barely resembles a living thing. It's revealed by Nurse Ackerman that the man with no family was taken off life support but was still alive, and she believes the man is pure evil with two spirits fighting for control. Pure evil man burnt to a crisp with something trying to keep him alive to torture him, presumably. Interesting. Anyway, Arthur gets the man to communicate that he wants to go to a Fazbear Entertainment distribution center, and going against all the nurses telling him not to, he leaves determined to fulfill this man's final wish. Mia, a nurse that's new to the hospital, overhears the other nurses discuss plans to kill the man in 1280. Mia is then mildly tormented by a young boy with curly black hair, an alligator mask, and a devilish grin. Soon, there were many reports of people saying the same boy. Meanwhile, all the other nurses try and fail to kill the man, with all attempts being sabotaged by the mysterious boy. Later, Arthur finally gets permission to take the man, but Mia tries to convince him not to. He politely ignores her pleading, and after taking the man to part of the distribution center, the man barfs up a tar-like substance as he falls apart, and pretty much explodes. Arthur spots a trail of small footprints and the puddle of black blood leading towards shelving units as a man comes over to make sure he's okay. He's not. Wow, this story is easily the most heavy with lore. First of all, it gives us an alternative to where Ultimate Custom Night likely took place. Many people previously believed that it actually took place in Purgatory, but now it seems that it is actually taking place in William Afton's mind, where he's trapped by one of his victims, which is really freaking interesting. Additionally, looking back at the games, Cassidy, who's the vengeful spirit tormenting William Afton, and also possesses Golden Freddy, which we'll come back to with the next story, Cassidy can also mean curly-haired, like the boy we see throughout this story, which is also relevant for the next story that I want to talk about. Plus, it also drives home the whole multiple spirits possessing one thing, so that's pretty interesting. Overall, super lore-filled, so freaking good, 10 out of 10. Number 5, The New Kid. Devin, an angsty teen looking to get in with the popular kids to get closer to his crush, and Mick, a socially awkward nerd with a knack for out-of-date phrases, become quick friends with the new kid, Kelsey. After the demolition of Devin and Mick's abandoned gas station hangout, Kelsey gives some advice on finding a new hangout, but Devin quickly grows jealous and resentful towards Kelsey, as Kelsey unintentionally gains the undivided attention of Devin's crush, Heather. In an act of revenge, Devin has Kelsey climb into an old golden bear suit at an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's pizzeria, which he plans to leave Kelsey in, knowing it takes more than one person to get out. However, his plan backfires as the suit's spring locks snap, presumably killing Kelsey. Roughly a week later, Devin goes back to see if Kelsey is somehow still alive in the suit while Mick covers for him. Unfortunately, Devin gets his arm stuck in the golden bear suit and sees a corpse inside that clearly isn't Kelsey's and eventually dies. This story ends with Kelsey, alive and well, asking a couple local kids if they know any cool places to hang out, the same way he introduced himself to Devin and Mick. So the first time I read this one, I was actually a little confused and kind of annoyed, because I was just thinking, who would just leave when they potentially killed somebody? And then I realized, between the shock and the fact that they were constantly trying to convince themselves that there's a chance that Kelsey's still alive, they would probably do that. Like, I think I would probably do that if I was in their situation. I would also like to note that the corpse that Devin finds in the Freddy suit is very similar to that of the kid described in The Man in Room 1280, which can draw a parallel possibly between that kid and possibly Andrew, which is pretty interesting in my opinion, and it's one of the reasons I rated it a little bit higher on this list, because I thought it was pretty freaking cool. Number 4, Bunny Call. Bob, along with his wife Wanda and 3 children, Tyler, Aaron, and Cindy, go on a camping trip that Bob doesn't want to go on, out of spite towards his family for dragging him to this camp and not even letting him choose fishing for one of their scheduled activities. Bob accepts the receptionist's offer to opt into Bunny Call, a prank pulled by one of the camp counselors wearing a bunny suit named Ralpho, where they barge into the cabin and create a ruckus to wake up the campers. Side note, if you're a person who would actually opt into this, fuck you. You're a bad person. End of story. After the first day, Bob realizes how much he loves his family and starts to regret signing them up for the bunny call, causing him to barely sleep before confronting Ralpho on the front porch, telling him to leave because he changed his mind. Ralpho walks away initially, but then tries to break in through every entrance available, even the crawlspace trap door. At 6 a.m. sharp, just as Ralpho is leaning through the loft window near where his sons are sleeping, he leaves. Bob is exhausted from keeping the insane rabbit mascot out, but greets his family with newfound energy and enthusiasm until he finds out the counselor who was supposed to wear the Ralpho suit overslept. Oh boy. So this one was easily the most terrifying to me personally because I have a horrible fear of animatronics and mascots, and the thought of them trying to break in and then bleeding like a living fucking being is terrifying. Just absolutely awful. Also, it does bring up the question of just how much life can be brought into some of these creatures just through negative emotions and potentially spirits, which I do find pretty interesting. And before you asked, yes, I refuse to sit in Santa's lap, and when my mom tried to get me to take pictures with the mall Easter Bunny, I cried. I'm not joking. This isn't a bit. I'm 100% serious. Number 3, In the Flesh. Matt is a game developer tasked with developing the AI for Springtrap in an upcoming VR FNAF game, Springtrap's Revenge. Becoming frustrated with the inability to get past Springtrap, who was developed through the anger over his failed marriage and other relationships, he decides to trap the AI in a part of the maze where he can't kill anyone for the rest of the night. Next day, he goes to play but can't find Springtrap. Matt takes a quick look at the game data to find the AI programming had been corrupted by Springtrap cloning himself and killing the old version. Going back into the game, Matt comes into contact with Springtrap and is met with an unexplainable sharp sting. In real life, Matt suddenly becomes more aggressive and hungry, and he appears unexplainably bloated and experiencing unexplained morning sickness. His roommate, Jason, decides to move out after learning Matt has flirted with Jason's girlfriend on a double date. Meanwhile, in the game, Springtrap has been extracted from the game, and in the code is a program called itsaboy.exe. On yet another date, this fucking douchebag strikes out once more after insulting his date's weight after he has no fucking room to talk. After getting home, he's in excruciating pain and even sees strange imprints pressing against his stomach. He grabs a kitchen knife, cuts himself open, and while the pain was mostly relieved, a small Springtrap climbs out of his abdomen. As Matt lays on the floor bleeding out, the Springtrap strokes his cheek and says, "Daddy." It's a boy. Okay, hear me out. I know this is a weird one to put this high on the list, but I honestly loved it. It was weird and gross, and you were definitely clearly supposed to hate Matt, which I 100% did. This man was this weird hybrid of an incel, a fuckboy, and a nice guy, and it was just awful. Plus the part where he insults his date's weight, and then right afterwards the buttons on his shirt pop open because he's so bloated is gold. As a lesbian, the way he talks to women is so fucking gross and just Additionally, and unfortunately, it does give us another alternative for how Glitchtrap might have escaped to the real world, but I'm really hoping not because that's so fucking gross, and it's easily the second worst gender reveal right behind burning down part of California. Number 2, Coming Home. A year prior, Susie was lured away by a serial killer and murdered. Sound familiar? Susie's family is left in ruins after her death, with her dad leaving, her mom drugging herself, and her sister Samantha riddled with grief. Susie's spirit lingers with her family during the day, and at midnight every night, Chica comes to take Susie away. Knowing there's only 2 days before the rest of the leaves fall from her beloved tree, Oliver, and that she has to leave forever after all the leaves have fallen, Susie tries to communicate with Samantha through drawings. Her drawings attempt to show Samantha where Susie hid Gretchen, a doll that their mother made them share and that Susie hid from Samantha before being murdered. On the final night, Samantha is running from Chica but manages to finally find Gretchen, allowing Susie's soul to be set free. After saying a heartfelt final goodbye, Susie leaves with Chica and Samantha finally is able to get closure. I debated a lot on how far I wanted to put this one on the list because it's very heartbreaking, but it just drives home something that we've known for a long time, which was the whole Susie and Chica connection. And the reason I decided to put it this high on the list was it gave us some insight into the actual impact that the missing children's incident had on the families. And it's really sad and really interesting to see that, but just the absolute heartbreak, I had to put it this high on the list. So argue with me all you want, I think it belongs here. Number 1, Step Closer. Pete is forced to babysit his younger brother Chuck following his parents' divorce. Becoming resentful and frustrated by the circumstances, he takes his brother to the maintenance room where Chuck runs away and Pete's shirt gets stuck on a nail as Foxy comes out and gets stuck on the lyric, "You can be a pirate, but first you have to lose an eye and an arm, yarg." The next day, Pete is sick. Over the course of several days, his arm and eye are put in harm's way by a scalpel and windblown fishing hook nearly taking his eye, and a butcher's knife and a buzzsaw nearly taking his arm. His brother theorizes it might have something to do with Foxy, but Pete dismisses and insults him. Next day at the homecoming carnival, Pete has even more close calls and even hallucinations seeing Foxy in a mirror maze. Finally, considering Chuck's theory might be correct and that Foxy is in fact the source of his torment, he frantically calls and leaves Chuck a voicemail telling him to meet at Freddy's. Immediately afterwards, Pete is struck by a car and killed. Chuck arrives at Freddy's and is subsequently picked up by his father before showing up at the scene and seeing Pete's body being put in an ambulance. Pete's soul remains in his body long enough to hear two surgeons discuss that he was an organ donor, which wasn't his choice, but his mom signed him up for it, and that they just received an emergency case where someone needed an eye and a hand. Several weeks later, Chuck goes back to Freddy's and tries to confront Foxy, but Foxy is motionless. Alright, so this was definitely my absolute favorite, which I know is going to be a very controversial opinion. In my opinion, it just had the perfect mix of lore and suspense and heartbreak, and it was really good. As I said with Lonely Freddy, I'm a sucker for redemption arcs that are cut short by tragedy, and I think they did it really well with this story. And it was just so friggin' good. Plus, with the lore, it does seem a lot like Pete might be the stand-in for Michael, and that Michael is in fact the older brother from FNAF 4, which is pretty interesting, but there's a lot more into that I don't really have time to discuss because this video's already gone on too long, so maybe in a future video I'll talk a little bit more in depth about that. But yeah, this was my absolute favorite. I think all these stories were pretty good, other than Too Beautiful, so yeah. So that's my ranking from the first 5 Fazbear Frights books. I know it was a longer video, so if you made it this far, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. I love talking about these books, so this was a really great outlet for me because I don't really have anybody else to talk to about them. So I would love to hear your guys' opinions about the video, about these books, what your rankings are, all that fun stuff. This was just so much fun for me. So if you did enjoy, please be sure to click all those fun buttons that really help me out. And yeah, I'm also still looking for an Among Us team. I've been looking on some Discords for smaller YouTubers, so I'm hoping that I can maybe find some, but might as well mention it here as well. So that's it for today. Have a great rest of your day, and stay awesome, dudes. Bye.